Hello, everybody. I'm so excited that you're here for the Connected and Protected Boundary class. A little housekeeping before we begin. I want to share that I am recording this and I will be putting the recording in the Relationship Rising uh, community as a replay. With that said, if you want to share anything, if you have any questions, there will be time at the end for some shares, some questions and answers. I will not be sharing any of that. I'll be actually editing out anything that anybody else shares on this class, on this call, and only be sharing the teaching that I do. So feel free to share whatever you want to share, to raise your hand, to ask questions. You can also ask questions in the chat. So that is that for now. I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. So I have about an hour, it might be a little bit less today. And I know that your time is really valuable, so I want to jump right in. So I'll be sharing my screen. So this is the Connected and Protected Boundary class. Today we're diving into how boundaries and self-esteem can lead to happy and healthy relationships. So I recently learned this really fantastic framework from my teacher and mentor, Terry Real, and I can't wait to share it with you. This was really eye-opening for me to look at boundaries in this way, and I'm really, really excited to share and be teaching this with you now. So in today's world, we really want so much more from our relationships, so much more than our parents and our grandparents. We really crave deeper connections. We crave the physical intimacy, this stuff that lasts a lifetime. We really are feeling, when relationships get stagnant, we're not okay with that. We want more. But to achieve this, to really have those really, really deep connections, we have to have healthy boundaries. And in order to have healthy boundaries, we have to have healthy self-esteem. So today I'm going to be teaching about boundaries in a way that maybe you haven't heard before. I know this was certainly the case for me. And what I'm about to share was really, really, it blew my mind, to be honest. So you are in the right place if you struggle with healthy boundaries in relationships. So what does that even mean? Well, here are some of the ways that you have unhealthy boundaries might show up. So you feel insecure when a partner or friend needs space. You tend to bottle up your feelings and don't share much with loved ones. You're going to you're the go-to support person, but don't feel you can turn to others. You struggle to feel or express difficult emotions. You find it hard to deal with others' difficult emotions, trying to fix them. It's like their emotions are uncomfortable for you, so you try to fix them, make them happy, help them feel better. You're confused about what healthy boundaries are. I know this was one for me for so long. Boundaries are not like this clear, defined thing. They're sort of energetic in a way. So if you feel confused about boundaries, you're in the right place. If you often feel taken advantage of or resentful in your relationships, that's a sign. Maybe you tend to get burnt out at work or in your personal life. That's another sign. So these are just some examples. It's not an exhaustive list of what an unhealthy boundary might look like, but just to give you an idea. So today you're going to discover the two key inner boundaries that affect how close, safe, and secure you feel in relationships. You're going to discover the old and new ways of intimacy and connection, and how your self-esteem affects your boundaries and relationships. So if you don't know me, if you haven't been in my field for very long, my name is Mary Ellen, and I am a certified trauma-informed relationship vitality coach and breathwork facilitator. I've been doing this work for over 10 years and specialize in burnout and relationship challenges. So over the years, I've taken many trainings and I've developed this unique somatic approach, combining psychology, spirituality, and energy healing along with my own life experience. So, my journey of self discovery really began at the age of 13 when I started to read all the self help books, psychology, spirituality, anything I could get my hands on, because I just wasn't happy. I beat myself up. I had horrible self esteem and I couldn't figure out why. My family life seemed okay. I knew my parents loved me and I just wanted to fix myself. What's wrong with me? So, I really struggled and was so desperate for answers. I was a people pleaser, perfectionist. I burnt out at work. I took everything personally and would obsessively think about what other people thought of me or what they said. I would just loop in thoughts. And I had a string of really dysfunctional relationships in my teens, 20s, and 30s. My husband and I now have been together for 14 years. And I would say at least 6, 7 years, we had a pretty good first year, but then for 6, 7 years, we were not very healthy. I judged him, I criticized him. Um, we just we really buried a lot of anger. There were a lot of defensive strategies that we used, and we were both fighting to get our needs met but not doing it in a way that was healthy. So thankfully we both wanted to work on it and found an amazing coach that helped us turn it around. And I feel really blessed and proud of both of us that we've been able to create the relationship that we have now. And this is why I'm so passionate about relational work because, oh, I just really want what I have for everybody. And I know if you're in a struggling relationship that there is hope and you can turn it around. So, a lot of what I'm going to be sharing today comes from Terry Real. And he is someone that I am now training with. I'm excited to have started his training to become a couples coach in order to use his methods to help couples turn their relationships around. His work is something that my coach used with me and my partner, and I'm going to be learning how to do it now. So I'm really, really excited. So he's a well-known couples therapist, an author, a speaker. These are 4 of his books that he has written. I've read Us, and I've heard a lot of good things about. I don't want to talk about it. I do need to read his other books. And he's the founder and teacher of Relational Life Institute. He developed this style of therapy called relational life therapy. So I just want to give props to him. And he also shares that a lot of what he teaches is from Pia Melody. And she's been doing this work since probably the 80s, maybe even earlier. She has a bunch of books out as well. Okay, so what are the old ways of intimacy and connection? So here are some common behaviors that can actually hinder closeness. Overgiving. So you might overgive your time, your energy, not saying no because you want to be liked or not disappoint others. Oversharing. You might share too much too soon with someone or give personal details to people who haven't earned it. Not being a burden, so withholding your thoughts or emotions because there's fears that you might be too much. You learn somewhere along the way that you're too much, so you hold it in. You don't want to be a burden. Ignoring your own needs in the interest of other people. So you might struggle to even know what your needs or desires are and often put others ahead of your own. Feeling responsible for making other people happy or solving their problems. This is a big one. So you might take on the emotional burdens of others and really feel responsible for their happiness, for solving their problems. And these things we do thinking we're going to get that closeness, but it really actually does the opposite. People pleasing, this is another big one that I hear a lot about. Going out of your way to make others happy, often at your own expense. You have this fear of being disliked or rejected. Feeling guilty for setting boundaries or limits. This is a big one that I went through when I started to set boundaries. Oh my gosh, I would be shaking sometimes when I had to have a difficult conversation with somebody to set a boundary. Worrying that I was being selfish or hurtful, that the other person would be mad at me. And I promise the more you do this, the more you practice, the easier it gets. And most of the time people understand. It's a little funny there. So avoiding conflict, avoiding confrontation at all cost, even if it means compromising your own needs or values. Demanding that your needs be met. So you might find yourself making demands for closeness, or maybe you're the opposite. You want demands for distance and blaming your partner for your unhappiness, thinking, gosh, if I demand this and change them, then we'll be close. But again, it just does the opposite. Trying to change others' opinion of you. So maybe there's a really big discomfort inside of you if someone thinks poorly of you, and a strong desire to change their mind. So this can kind of get into controlling kind of territory. Overstepping boundaries. You might invade other people's privacy, not even realizing it. You might expect others to be available for them all the time and really not knowing where that boundary is. Taking criticism personally. So you might really be devastated by rejection, or even constructive criticism might be really hard for you, and you take it in as a reflection of your worth. So, the new way of intimacy and connection, there are three main points that you need to understand in order to have true closeness. So, this first one is there's two inner boundaries necessary for healthy relationships. So, in this first picture, this is demonstrating this protective boundary. We need to have a protective boundary. We don't let everything in. And then the second picture, this containing boundary, like we're holding in, if we said everything we thought, if we said everything we felt, we would create a lot of conflict and probably not have a lot of friends. So we need both of these in order to have that intimacy and closeness. The second thing you need to understand is where you gravitate on the relational grid when triggered. So we'll get into what the relational grid is in a moment, and then how to move into healthy balance for relational health and happiness. Okay, so the first one, the two psychological boundaries. These psychological boundaries are like the inner boundaries. We have our physical boundaries, which are like how close we feel comfortable with people. Like if somebody steps too close, you might move away, or you have your private things like your journal and your private drawers and things that we don't want people to go through. That's our physical boundary. But our inner boundaries, you can think of these like walls and windows of a house. So these boundaries function to protect you and to manage your interactions with others. So we have that protective and the containing boundaries. So the protective boundary is like the exterior walls of your house. And just like the walls of your home protect you from the external elements like weather and noise and intruders, your protective boundary shields you from harmful or negative external influences. Some examples of this: if someone makes a negative comment about you, your protective boundary acts like a strong wall, allowing you to evaluate the comment's validity without letting it harm your self-esteem. So, say your partner is just really in a bad mood and they say, "You never do the dishes." You're going to hold up your external protective boundary and let it hit that boundary, not just going to let it in. If I let that in, I'm going to start thinking, oh, they think I'm a mess. They're mad at me. They think I never help. It's so not true. And then I get triggered and I'm triggered and being defensive back at them. We want that statement, "You never do the dishes," to hit that wall, and then to ask, take a moment, is this true? Well, I know it's not true. I do the dishes. I do help out. Maybe today I didn't, but I know that I do the dishes. So I'm not going to let it. My partner's making up this story. We all do it. We all make up stories about each other all the time. And we have no control over that. We just have to be okay with the stories people make up about us. That's like holding that protective boundary, and then to calmly have a conversation with our partner. Hey, I can see you're really upset that the dishes aren't done. It's not true that I don't do the dishes. You know I do the dishes. And to help co-regulate, help them calm down and regulate. So in that moment, you might say, I'm happy to do the dishes, or I can do the dishes later, and to sort of, maintain that connection with your partner versus in defense, we're just creating disconnection. The other thing might happen is they say, you never do the dishes, and that hits the outer wall. And we ask, is that true? And maybe it's been true for the last 5 days. Yes, it is true. I've been completely swamped at work. I'm totally exhausted at the end of the day, and I have been leaving some dishes in the sink. So if it is true, we let it in without harming our self-esteem. I'm not a bad person if I've drop the ball a few times. Not a bad person, but there is a repair to be made here. So to validate your partner's frustration, look, I see that you're frustrated and you're right. I have been dropping the ball. I'm so sorry. I really apologize. And I'm going to try to do better. Like, to next week won't be so busy. I promise I'll pick up the slack. Tonight I'll do the dishes in an hour, right? To kind of make up that repair and also help to regulate and calm your partner down. So again, you want to ask yourself if it's true or not, and then decide how to respond. So what if your protective boundary is weak or non-existent? So like your house, if it lacks strong walls, you're going to be vulnerable to external threats. Much like being overly reactive to other people's opinions and judgments, right? If I just let that statement in, you never do the dishes, I'm going to be completely emotionally reactive and defensive. And then what if your boundaries are overly rigid? Maybe they're too firm. So walls without windows can isolate you, making it difficult to receive constructive feedback or connection with others emotionally. And often, even when we have these firm, hard boundaries, we really do want connection and closeness. But when our boundaries are too rigid, it keeps people out and it actually keeps you walled in. So you can't have that closeness. Okay, so what about the containing boundary, the windows and the doors of your house? So the windows and doors regulate what goes out and what comes in. They can be open to let in fresh air and light, or closed to keep out unwanted elements. So similarly, your containing boundary controls your expressions and emotions, ensuring that what you share with the world is appropriate and mindful, right? So our containing boundary is about maintaining relationships if we just said whatever we wanted or whatever we felt, we would push people away. You might know somebody like this that doesn't have much of a containing boundary and they sort of spill out all the way, or they're very emotionally reactive, and you kind of walk on eggshells like, oh, I don't want to say the wrong thing. Are they going to be upset with me? And it really makes relationships hard. So you want to work on that containing boundary. An example of this: when you feel angry or frustrated, your containing boundary functions like a closed window, holding back these emotions until you can express them constructively. So, maybe with your partner, you're really triggered. Oh, you're so angry, really frustrated. We don't want to have difficult, hard conversations from that place. So, asking for some space to cool off so that you can come back to the conversation with a more calm manner. We don't wanna fly, like, if we do that, we might, if we don't kinda take time to contain, we might fly off the handle, and then everybody else feels it, and it makes the relationship hard. So what do? We take a deep breath and choose our response instead of reacting impulsively. We wanna choose the response. We don't wanna just be reactionary. Taking a deep breath is a huge help. And asking for space. If you need that time, that's okay. So, what if our containing boundary is weak or non existent? Without proper windows and doors, our oops, sorry, I wanted to just double check something. Okay, so what if our containing boundary is weak or non-existent? Without proper windows and doors, your emotions can spill out uncontrollably, overwhelming those around you. And then if your containing boundary is overly rigid, your windows are permanently shut, and that prevents you from sharing your true feelings and needs, leading to isolation and misunderstandings. So, to balance our boundaries, we want the middle ground. We want healthy boundaries that are like a well built house with sturdy walls and functional windows. They allow you to filter and take in constructive feedback while protecting you from negativity. They also help you be mindful of what you let out and your impact on others. And then the self esteem connection with our balanced boundaries is just like a well maintained house needs regular upkeep. Good boundaries require self esteem. Believing in your own worth and not looking down on others, so being equal, helps you maintain these boundaries, ensuring you feel secure yet open to growth. Okay, so I want to do a practice. Like I said, we have our physical boundaries, but I'm talking about more of these inner energetic boundaries. And I wanted to guide you through a visualization so that you can feel what these boundaries feel like. So take a moment, find a comfortable seat, maybe close your eyes or look inward or look down, whatever feels comfortable for you now. And take a really deep cleansing breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. Really letting your body settle into this space. Feeling your feet on the ground, your seat in the chair, feeling held and supported by the earth. And you might like that vision, that idea of the house as the boundaries. Maybe you envision your perfect home, being inside your perfect home. Or maybe you envision your boundary as an energetic container. I like to see it as like a bubble that I'm inside of this energy is firm, it's fully enclosed, but that it's a little bit malleable, it's not rigid. It's going to flex when it's pushed on, but it won't tear or break. You might also want to envision inside of an egg, something like that. So, getting a vision or a felt sense of what your energetic boundaries feel like, look like, what shape do they take, what color. This is unique for everyone, so I want you to really explore what is it for you? Yeah, really, really good. So now I want you to focus on that protective boundary, the outside of your home, the outside of the energetic bubble. And imagine that here you are inside of your boundary. This protective boundary is all around you. It's firm, but malleable. And imagine someone's mad at you for something you didn't do. Let's just do something simple. They they are accusing you of taking their favorite pen, and they're very angry, and you can feel it, and you know you didn't take it. You're 100% sure you didn't take it. You want what they're saying and their emotional reactions to hit that wall, to hit the outside protective boundary and not come into your calm, peaceful center. They're angry at you, they're emotional, maybe they're erratic, doesn't make sense, and you are peaceful inside of your bubble, not letting it in, knowing it's not true. You don't have to get upset. You don't have to defend yourself. You don't have to push back because your boundary is protecting you. You know it's not true. You're not letting it in. It's not affecting your self esteem, how you feel about yourself. And you see, they're making up a story about you. We all do it. They're making it up that you took their pen and you just didn't. And from this calm center, having the calm ability to say, I didn't take your pen, I know I didn't, helping to calm them down. And if they don't calm down, that's okay too. You can walk away from the situation. You don't have to listen to it. So just noticing how that feels to not let in somebody else's charge, their upset, even if it's with you. So now I want you to bring awareness to your inner containing boundary. We're going to do a different example. Imagine that there's some road rage. They're riding too close behind you, honking at you, and then they swerve out and swerve in front of you, and they are just furious. And you definitely feel triggered. I've had this happen for sure, and it's scary. You feel triggered. You have this urge to lash out. How could they? Why would they? Oh my gosh, they need to stop. This is so wrong. And it's like they're coaxing you into this drama with them. It's somebody you don't know, and you start to make up this story that they're a horrible person. But you have this containing boundary. And you don't need to let it out. You don't need to react. If you react, it's only going to escalate. This is somebody you don't even know. They don't matter to the whole grand scheme of life. And so you choose to contain your charge. You choose to contain your reaction. And instead, you hold it in and you metabolize it. You stay grounded in yourself. They seem reactionary, they seem irrational. You don't need to take the bait. Inside of this containing boundary, you can transform that emotional charge. And again, just metabolize it, digest it, and let it go. So now really noticing what that's like to contain your own energy, not getting baited into some kind of dramatic exchange. Yeah, really, really good. So when you're ready, coming back, opening your eyes. And I'm curious, I'd love to hear from any of you that if you want to share your experience. Are these boundaries something you've heard before or something new? Go ahead and share it in the chat, or you can raise your hand. Yeah, really, really good. So that's a good practice that you can do. So that's a good practice you can do over and over to really get a handle on these two inner boundaries. Okay, so we are going on to the relationship grid. So this is by Terry Real, and what he did was he took the boundaries. So if you look at this graph here, the boundaries are the horizontal line, and he combined it with the self-esteem, which is the vertical line. So these are, I want to preface and say that what I'm talking about here are strategies that we learned and picked up early in childhood. They end up often developing into things that hold us back from what we really want. But it's important to remember that these are learned behaviors, and it's not your fault that you develop these ways of being. And as an adult, you are fully capable of coming into the center of health. So, and we do kind of bounce around, but we typically have a main area that we reside in these four quadrants in specific relationships. So if we're talking about a romantic relationship, maybe your current one or the most recent one, be thinking about that where you land in this quadrant. Okay, so I'm going to start with the boundaries axis on the walled off side. So if you're walled off, you tend to have your boundaries are too firm. You're protected but not connected. You can be dismissive and unapproachable. You may lack receptivity and emotional availability. Uh, this this section doesn't share thoughts, feelings, or needs. Some examples: responding to criticism with dismissal. That's ridiculous. I can't believe you would think that. I'm not even going to entertain that. Being cold and aloof in relationships. Keeping others at a distance to avoid vulnerability. Vulnerability can be really, really hard, and it's something that we can learn to do. And vulnerability is strength, and it's what really brings closeness, is when we can be vulnerable. So how this affects your relationships: it prevents intimacy and connection. It makes it hard for others to approach or engage meaningfully. It creates an emotional barrier that can lead to loneliness and isolation. So on the flip side of the boundaries axis is the boundary less. So the boundary less are often too porous. They are connected, but they're not protected. They're highly reactive to others' opinions and feedback. They're overly accommodating and people-pleasing. They take in everything without filtering it. Some examples, like changing behaviors based on others' criticism. So if someone says they don't like your shirt, you're going to get rid of it. You might be overly sensitive and taking everything personal, and not set limits and leading to burnout. how this affects your relationship. It leads to dependency and a lack of self-identity. It creates a cycle of overgiving and resentment, and it makes it difficult to maintain a healthy sense of self. So here, when we're boundaryless, we don't really know where the other ends and we begin, and we just don't really have a strong sense of self. And then for the self-esteem axis, we're looking at the grandiosity, the one up. If you're in this area, you feel superior and entitled. You may have a lot of contempt in relationships, the belief that you're better or above the rules. Some examples: thinking your opinions are always right and dismissing others, feeling entitled to special treatment or privileges, displaying contemptuous behavior in relationships, so always looking down on others or better than. How this affects your relationships: it creates this power imbalance and resentments. Others are going to walk on eggshells around you, and it makes it hard. It prevents genuine connection and mutual respect, and it leads to a lack of empathy and understanding. All of these things just really are disconnecting, not bringing you closer. On the flip side of the self-esteem axis is the one down shame area, feelings of worthlessness, defectiveness, and being unlovable, insecurity and low self-esteem, feeling inferior and less than others. Some examples: constantly seeking validation and approval from others. We don't trust ourselves, we're seeking externally. Avoiding confrontation due to fear of rejection. Over accommodating to avoid conflict. So there's a lot of fear of conflict. I'm too scared of conflict. Not good enough. This affects your relationship because it leads to dependency and lack of assertiveness. Makes it difficult to set healthy boundaries. If we're in this shame one down, we just don't feel strong enough to set boundaries. And it creates a cycle of self-sabotage and low self-worth. So we're sabotaging our own needs. We don't even often know what our needs are. So the healthy center of this is a more balanced approach. You have healthy boundaries and self-esteem. Healthy center, so neither you're not too open or too closed. There's ability to be protected and connected simultaneously. Their self-esteem is internal and not dependent on external validation. Some examples are taking in feedback while filtering it based on the truth and relevance. So I'm not going to just take everything in, I'm going to filter in feedback. Setting limits appropriately and asserting needs kindly. Maintaining a sense of self-worth regardless of other people's opinions. So people are going to have opinions about us. If we always take it personally, it's going to hurt our self-worth. But if we have healthy boundaries, we don't let that in. How it affects our relationships: it enables genuine intimacy and connection, promotes mutual respect and understanding, supports a healthy and balanced self-identity. So again, it's important to understand that these strategies are learned behaviors to keep us safe. If we had families that were always boundaryless, crossing our boundaries, we'll be more walled off. If we had families that were more walled off, we might be more boundaryless. We might, and if we have the grandiosity, we might have had parents that falsely lifted us up. No matter what we do, we couldn't do anything wrong, or they shamed us and put us down. So these are all things that we learn when we're really, really young. And if we want really loving, close, connected relationships, we have to outgrow these ways of being. Okay, so now I want you to think about where you land in the quadrants in your primary relationship. So maybe you're in a romantic relationship now, or maybe the most recent one you had, or maybe this is a really close family member or friendship. Be thinking about, where do you tend to land in that relationship? And again, we might bounce around this, but we tend to land in one specific area for each of our relationships. Okay, so if we are walled off and one up in that upper left corner, there's a lot of contempt. We're never wrong. We can be aloof and indifferent. We can be passive aggressive, high and mighty. We might think, oh, you're not even worthy, so I'm not going to give you any time of the day. When we're in the one up position, we need to learn to come down and see the other eye to eye. You are not better than anyone else. We are all born into this world as equals. There is no better or worse. We are all equals, and we must learn to see each other that way. And then if we're walled off, we must learn to soften our walls, to open the windows, to let others in, but in a healthy way. We don't want to just get rid of our boundaries. We need those boundaries. We need the protective and containing boundaries, but to soften them. Maybe you are in the boundary less and one up section. That this section can be volatile, controlling, reactive, self-righteous. Oftentimes violence can be, like domestic violence can be in this quadrant. You might think, how dare you? I can't believe you said that or you did that. So again, when we're in the one up position, we need to come down as equals, see our partner or the other as an equal. And then when we're on this boundary less side, we need to start to see where the other ends and where you begin. You don't let everything in and you don't let everything out. So really working on those two inner boundaries. If someone is talking negatively to you, you don't just let it in and affect how you feel about yourself. You ask again, is it true? And if it is, then there's something to be done about it. Or maybe you are in the boundary less and one down. So if you're in this quadrant, there's a lot of anxiousness, maybe feeling desperate in the relationship or needing to manipulate the other, feeling clingy or needy. In this quadrant, you might be thinking, oh, whatever you want, I'll do anything. I just want you to love me. So in this one down position, you must learn to pull yourself up. You are just as lovable, just as worthy as everyone else. And again, learning where your boundary is, where the other is, what is yours, what is theirs. And then the walled off and one down. So this is really where we might end up if, the relationship and our strategies don't work. We kind of go to this helpless, depressed, withdrawn place. We will be numbing out. We might think, why even try? It's helpless. It's hopeless. I can't get what I need. And we just get stuck in this walled off and one down. We need to get help if we're in this place. Help to work on your self-esteem, help to opening up to others, letting others in. Yeah, so thinking about all of this, where do you tend to mostly reside? Where do you reside in all of this? So I want to share a little bit of my story. I'm going to get out of sharing for a moment. And I just wanted to share a little bit of my story to kind of illustrate this a little bit more for you. So I really grew up in a walled off family where showing emotions was seen as really inconvenient, not okay. It's not okay to show negative emotions. So I learned to keep my feelings to myself. But I was a really emotional and sensitive child. So I thought this meant that I was bad and wrong, and that, because I had emotions, there was something wrong with me. And so I believed that my job was to make other people happy and to have no needs in order to be worthy of love and belonging. And as a teen and a young adult, I ended up in a string of dysfunctional relationships with boyfriends who I either had to take care of to lift them up, or they took advantage of me. And with poor self esteem, I lived in that boundaryless and one down position. It was like, I would do anything for you. Just love me. Just make me feel okay in the world. I'll do anything. And through a lot of personal work, I was able to bring myself up. But what happened was I ended up in the one up and boundaryless position, and often would flip into the walled off position with my now husband. And he tended to be more walled off, but he would flip to the boundaryless when triggered. And that really made our relationship volatile. It was very up and down. We weren't violent, but there were moments of anger. We would get really angry and then we would withdraw. It was like, oh, anger is not okay. So we would withdraw from each other. And our coach said that it was amazing that we even stayed together for so long because we were both so disconnected from each other. But it wasn't like we ever wanted to leave at the same time. So one of us would pull the other back in if we started to split too much. And I was really sensitive to criticism, and my husband struggled with communicating his needs compassionately. So I would be defensive and reactive. And we ended up triggering each other a lot. And when triggered, we would pull away to avoid these big blowouts. And what I needed to learn was that I was just as much a part of the problem as he was. And when I learned this, it was so uncomfortable. I just thought it was all him. I just thought if he changed, then everything would be fine. And when I saw, like, oh, I'm playing this part in this, I'm so defensive, I'm so reactionary to all these little criticisms and requests that he's making, and that I needed to work on my protective and containing boundaries. I didn't have those words back then, but now I see it, having those frames of like, oh yeah, my boundaries were kind of non-existent. To do this, I had to heal the little girl inside of me who felt unworthy and unlovable. I needed to know and express my own needs, and to build resilience to criticism, and understand that it was okay for others to be upset with me. It didn't mean that I was a bad person. People are going to be upset with you. It's okay. And when I saw my role in this dynamic, finally, it was so painful, but I was able to change my part of it and hold space for my partner's upset. And that's really what he wanted too, was to be able to share his upset with me. I learned to communicate my needs and to open my heart, even though it was really scary. And my husband did his work too, thankfully. And today we have the most secure and loving relationship I've ever known. I didn't even know that it could be this good. And, I'm so proud of us for doing this work. It's really hard work, but it's so worth it. So, what is this work that I speak of that helped us both come to the center of health on this relationship grid? So, I'm going to share again. So, this work is inner child healing. And you might be thinking, oh, inner child healing, what is this? This is woo woo. I've had clients who have said this to me before. I always thought this was silly or woo woo until they really started to do the work. And it seems like it should be simple, but this is some of the hardest work to do. So we all have these three aspects of our inner world, of our psyche. We have the wounded child. So this is the part of us that was wounded by abuse or neglect. So this is when we're often before the age of 7, and we experience any kind of trauma. It could be really big trauma, it could be really small trauma. And trauma is really anything that happens to us that we're not able to process and integrate in the moment. And it's kind of sticks with us. It sticks in our tissues, in our energy field. And as children, we need adults to help us regulate and understand, what happened to us, what's going on, why are our parents fighting, why did somebody pass away, to have adults help us understand this. But often our parents, our caregivers aren't emotionally mature enough to even do that for themselves, so they can't do it for us. So what we do as children is we make up these stories. I'm not lovable. I'm too much. I'm not good enough. We make up these stories and we think that it's our fault that things happen to us. And we carry these wounds, sometimes for a lifetime. This is the part of us that is really young, really innocent, vulnerable. It can even be pre-verbal. Often this part of us is overwhelmed. It's really lonely, but it longs for connection. This is a part of us that, when it's healthy, it brings play and creativity and wonder and joy to our life. And this wound is really tender. It's really sensitive. It doesn't feel good. So what happens is we create an adaptive child. The child, this is the version of the adult. It's a child version of the adult that develops to protect the wounded child. So this part of us is often a perfectionist. It can be harsh. It can be judgmental and unforgiving. It sees the world as black or white. It's often an older child. It's not that really young, sensitive, vulnerable child. It's an older child or maybe teen. And it's unwilling to learn new skills. So it has these strategies. I'm going to keep you walled off, or I'm going to, be clingy, or whatever. It has these strategies to feel safe, and it's not willing to often not willing to let it go very easily. It's all about self-preservation, and it sees intimacy as a threat. Intimacy is scary. It's a threat. I'm going to protect myself at all costs. And often this part of us sabotages what we truly want in relationship. We want closeness. We want connection, but it creates the opposite. So then we have our wise adult self. This is the mature, thoughtful, nuanced, forgiving part of ourself. This part of us can make thoughtful, mindful decisions. It comes with all the wisdom of our years lived. It's based in the present moment. It sees the gray areas of life. It's okay with imperfection and ambiguity. It understands that the traumas impacted our life and relationship, and it has compassion for these younger parts. And it's able to learn new skills and care for all the parts of self. So this is like your inner leader, your inner loving parent, to give these child parts of you the love, safety, and belonging that you needed when you were young. So the work that I speak of is really to help this adaptive child give up the job of protecting the wounded child, and to give those inner children everything they needed way back then. To listen to them when they're upset, to care for them, to protect them, to love them, give them a sense of belonging, let them know they're never alone. And this is the hard work. We don't learn how to be this way with ourselves. We tend to judge ourselves. Stop doing that. Why do you do that? I don't want to do that anymore. And that just makes these parts bigger and bigger and bigger. So it takes a whole lot of practice. And this is what I do with my clients is I model it for them. I help them practice this over and over. They do it on their own until it's a skill that you just automatically do. And I can share that this took me probably 6 years to really, really grasp and to really integrate into my life. I hope it doesn't take everyone that long, but it took me that long. So I'm going to end here while letting you know that the next training will be on this inner child healing work. So this is sort of leading you up to the solution. What do we do about all of these dysfunctional ways of being in our relationships? We all have to take responsibility for our adapted child and our wounded child and to be that inner loving parent. Okay, well, thank you so much for being here. Wishing you all a wonderful rest of your week, and I will see you next time. Bye.